I've been here for so long, I've had some really weird ones, and that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. Hopefully you'll find it entertaining, maybe you'll find it concerning, maybe it will make you want to apply, who knows. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Maria and I'm a third year medical student studying at the University of Cambridge. So safe to say I've had my fair share of weird supervisions. From real life babies and puppies to green hair and dinosaurs to champagne and ever so tipsy giggles. I guess I've had a mixed lot. Oh, and the suppos on a Sunday morning or the ones at 9 p.m. on a Friday, those definitely hurt. Supervisions are a central tenet of the Cambridge education system. They're essentially glorified small group teaching sessions, often led by a professor, a researcher, or sometimes just an older student. I mean, what better way to instill academic rigour than micromanagement and accountability? In all fairness, I would say they can be useful. So I've had about 12 supervisors over 2.5 years. That's mainly because I've been doing medicine and now natural sciences in my third year, and those are courses which tend to have quite a lot of supervisions in different groups for different courses. Making the most of the supervisions though has definitely been a steep learning curve. It's really important to be able to approach them in a good way. I will put up a video on how to make the most of them. I mean, how useful are the supervisions when there's literally nothing to say after half an hour, or the ones where you treat it like an interview and you don't ask a single question? Anyway, here is a countdown of my most peculiar and memorable experiences. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So number 1, the one with the baby. So in first year, we would have this one supervisor who would bring his real life baby to our supervisions. It was quite comical really, the way he'd hold the baby in his lap while just sitting there and talking to us about biochemistry. It was a bit less comical when the baby would start crying and that would just disrupt the supervision. But to be honest, the supervisions for this course weren't really that useful anyway. So my final verdict is the baby was a really welcome distraction and she was awfully cute. Number 2, the ones in the museum. So this was actually one of my most recent supervisions that I had as part of my vertebrate evolution course. And I got emailed by my supervisor to meet him under the whale half an hour before the supervision. Given that we spend so much time at the zoo site, that wasn't even surprising. It was actually a pretty cool supervision. We were just surrounded by all of these exhibits and we just talked about things as diverse as dinosaur locomotion, the necks of giraffes and how birds breathe. Number 3, the one with the great game of catch the fossil. So my vertebrate evolution supervisions were always entertaining and this one was no exception. First of all, my super partner tried to sneak in her bike into Christ's, emphasize on attempted. She managed to get halfway through the first courtyard though, before one of the porters yelled at her, which I'd say was a valiant effort. It also felt very fitting having our supervisions at Christ's, just because Darwin went there and all. We would have a lovely time sitting in a very toasty room because the supervisor would always forget to turn the heating off. And I remember there'd always be all these specimens scattered all over his desk, mostly birds. And I remember I once asked if they were real before having one hurled at me and the supervisor shouting catch. The ones where we really had to ask, is this a joke? So we had this one supervisor who had a penchant for saying things that were sometimes funny, but sometimes just downright uncomfortable. For example, there was this one girl who got glandular fever in my supervision. It's colloquially known as the kissing disease. He kind of made a whole big fuss of asking who she had been kissing. He also once did this Jamaican impression, which felt kind of borderline racist, and it was really awkward to watch. And once I got called special, but in a bad way. We were all convinced that these were harmless jokes, but who knows? I mean, mostly the guy was a great supervisor and we learned a lot from him. He even ran supervisions for us throughout the entirety of summer, which were incredibly useful, and yeah, I would say I learned a lot from him. Even so, I still find the experiences odd to this day. Number 5, the ones with the lime green chinos and the bright green hair. Not all that much to say, except that when we strolled into the supervision, it was absolutely iconic to see our supervisor with bright green hair. Also, whenever he paired them with those lime green chinos, honestly, what a look. Hashtag fashion goals. Number 6, the one with the rankings, pressure and stress, but the snacks and pep talks made up for it. I'd say the most quintessentially Cambridge supervisions I had with this man. We would spend our Monday evenings sitting on a sofa with some tea and biscuits, talking through the course. He would teach us a lot and he was absolutely amazing at explaining things. Like, honestly, he was probably one of the best supervisors I have ever had. I genuinely think there were really good intentions behind all of his actions that he did. However, the more I look back on it, the more uncomfortable I feel. We were constantly bombarded with remarks about how we didn't have time for extracurriculars outside of medicine. I remember we were berated for doing extracurriculars like throwing, or for even considering going on the ski trip. We were being ranked against each other. I also remember being sat down once and he was like, "Don't worry about studying 14 hours a day. If you study 8 or 9, that's absolutely fine." And yeah, he told us we could take one day off when we were studying for our mocks over Christmas, and that would be Christmas Day. If we were feeling really lavish, maybe we could take off New Year's as well, but even that was just a maybe. The environment that fostered I don't think worked for me. I felt constantly stressed and I didn't feel happy being ranked against everybody else. It kind of introduced a lot of comparison, which I felt was really unhealthy. I also think that this attitude is what limited me meeting other people in college, and that's probably one of my biggest regrets that I've had. Number 7, the one with the half-an-hour suppos. So these were the suppos where if you asked a question without missing a beat, the guy would open up the laptop and he would proceed to direct you to the lecture notes, which talked about what you were confused about. Then his explanation would literally consist of just that, the material you didn't understand. When you ran out of questions, he'd ask, "Is there anything else?" If not, you were free to leave. And there were definitely a few occasions where we left after half an hour. The one with the champagne. So for the Christmas supervisions, there was this one supervisor who liked treating us with champagne. This was really lovely and it was a great way to end the term. It definitely made thinking about the holiday work quite a bit better. Unfortunately for me, I did end up feeling a bit tipsy after all the champagne, which was not ideal in a supervision. Number 9, the ones at 9 p.m. These were done by a clinical medical student in 4th year, so it was completely understandable that she just couldn't fit us into her schedule at any other time. Despite feeling sleepy, the supervisions were incredibly useful, and she honestly helped clear up so much of the course and direct our learning towards things which were high yield and actually examinable. She was also super sweet. In all fairness, the supos that are done by older students are often as useful, if not more useful, than the ones done by professors or researchers. It's because they've literally just experienced the course, and so they have lots of practical advice for how to attempt things and structure your revision. They're also really good at explaining concepts in a simple way and putting in more effort to match their supervising styles to meet your needs. There was this one medical student who would constantly bombard us with feedback surveys. Also, we had other supervisions at 9 a.m, so I guess it balances out. 10, the ones on weekends. So there was another medical student who did these, but these were for pharmacology instead. I didn't really like pharmacology as much, especially early on a weekend, but I must admit the supervisions were useful and I'm glad that we got support for the theory. 11. The ones where we just got grilled for an hour. So almost the entire supervision would be this young doctor on Zoom who would be asking us questions from the lectures. Oh, and not free for all questions. She would go through her list on Zoom and specifically target us one by one. She would rotate through each of us though, so you would have some notice before you'd be asked a question. If you had the notes up as well because it was on Zoom, you could even predict what she'd ask you. But even so, it still felt like we were being put on the spot in the supervisions and we couldn't really relax. The only saving grace though was the fact that they were online, so we had the notes to hand. Number 12, the one where she taught us the entire course in an hour, an absolute godsend. These were back in first year and we only had a handful of these. These were for our introductory course to statistics, which we got examined on at the end of our second term of first year. So pretty early on. She managed to get through all the concepts and her supervision handout in an hour, and the practice questions she had for us were really useful, and they formed the basis or entirety of my notes for the course. I felt quite prepared for the exam though, so what she did was really useful. Number 13, the one where he presented his grant proposal. I think some researchers shouldn't actually be drafted into teaching, especially when their heart isn't in it. We had this one supervisor who was interested in one module of the course and one module only. If you asked him about anything about this, he could go on for hours. But on the flip side, if you asked him about anything else, silence. He would just be like, that's a really interesting question. I will get back to you for next time. Or worse, he'd ask you to get back to the rest of the group for next time. Anyway, the supervisions eventually devolved into him presenting his grant proposal presentation and running journal clubs featuring his own papers, which were only very mildly related to the course. Moral of the story, just because somebody is smart and excels in their field doesn't mean that they will be a good teacher.
So that wraps up my list of weird suppos. Definitely a mixed bag, but I hope you enjoyed.